Creepy house check. Creepy kid check. Body horror check. Does Lee Cronin's The Mummy live up to the mythos? Or is it just another generic horror movie that takes inspiration from others? Stick around to find out. Welcome back. If you're new here, I review every movie I see in the theater. This is movie number 42 for the year. I usually start my reviews out with a quick overview of my general insights, spoiler-free, and then move into some spoiler discussions towards the end. This week we're talking about Lee Cronin's The Mummy, which is directed by Lee Cronin. He previously did Evil Dead Rise plus 50 States of Fright. Evil Dead Rise, I really enjoyed that movie when it came out. It was a lot of fun. It was very gory, and that's, I think, where a lot of this film takes inspiration from. Is there's a lot of that going on here as well. It's a very gory movie. This movie stars Jack Reynor as Charlie the father. He was in Power Ballad, also in Midsommar. Then you have Leah Costa as Larissa. She was in The Wheel of Time and also The Diplomat, along with Natalie Grace, who plays Katie, and she's been in things like 1923, A Little Emma. Lee Cronin's The Mummy basically follows the young daughter of a journalist who disappears into the desert without a trace. 8 years pass by and she is found, but not in the state that they were hoping for. And what would be a joyful reunion turns out to be kind of a nightmare for them. Yes, this movie does take inspiration from movies before. There's a lot of inspiration from Evil Dead in here. There's also inspiration from The Mummy as well. So overall, the story, even though pretty basic and simplistic, I really enjoyed it. I thought the movie was a lot of fun. Even at a running time of 2 hours and 15 minutes, it definitely didn't feel like that. The only thing I would say is that this movie is very gory. It does have Evil Dead vibes. The look of the movie heavily relies on the split diopter look, so maybe a little too much. If you don't know what the split diopter look is, I'll put a screenshot right here. And this is also from the same cinematographer, David Garbett, who also worked with Lee on Evil Dead Rise, and so there's a lot of split diopter in that film as well. I do like the look of the split diopter and how that kind of changes the feeling of a scene. They may use it a little too much in this film, but I'll leave you to decide for yourself if you think it was too much. Horror aspects of this movie, I didn't think it was scary for the most part. It is very body horror oriented. There wasn't really any jump scares or anything, at least for me. There might have been some people in the auditorium who saw some jump scares, but overall it's just kind of a creepy movie with an atmosphere. There's a little bit of comedy in a few aspects, and that's where the Evil Dead inspiration comes from, but there is an essence of kind of those earlier adaptations of the Mummy movie and some of the abilities that the mummies have had in previous earlier adaptations of Mummy movies, especially the powers that the mummies have. That kind of shows up in here a little bit, but in kind of a different aspect. There is also that kind of trope of the clicker noise that goes on, and it's been used in a lot of horror movies, especially movies that have a lot of creature effects or some kind of monster. There's always this clicky sound. I kind of bring it back to the clickers from Last of Us. Ever since those started up, that the sound, it is very unnerving sound, but it shows up in here. Although it's not used a lot, and the way it's used I actually liked and it made sense. It is not scary, but I did find the overall premise of the story and the family getting to grasp with this new situation interesting. And there is a double story around the family trying to figure out what's going on with Katie, and then there's the investigation of this Cairo detective who's trying to help them to figure out what happened to Katie as well. So character-wise, it's heavily focused on the family dynamic. You have Charlie and Larissa, these distraught parents who, after the loss of their daughter, are now living with Larissa's mom in this house in Albuquerque. It's kind of this manor out in the middle of the desert. You can still tell they have some, issues they need to deal with the loss of their daughter, not knowing what happened. They have since had another daughter, Maud, and they also have their son still, Sebastian, who was around when Katie was taken, and so he kind of remembers her a little bit, but Maud doesn't really know about Katie or really learn much about her in the past. You also have Grandma in this as well, who plays kind of a interesting role that brings in some different aspects to the film. And then there's also Detective Zaki, who is one of the Cairo detectives who was there there when Katie was first missing, but then shows up again when she is found and is the one who tells Charlie and the family that, hey, we found your daughter through certain circumstances. Who should watch this movie? I think anybody who enjoys the Evil Dead movies, especially Evil Dead Rise, enjoys a lot of kind of weird body horror, just some really uncomfortable scenes. You'll probably enjoy this. Overall, I thought it was a lot of fun. It was very dark, but it kind of had this, humoristic undersense with some of the things that they did that very much reminded me of something Sam Raimi might do. And there's a few scenes I'll talk about later that just were a little bit funny and understanding, okay, what the hell happened here? So if you enjoyed Evil Dead Rise or any of Lee Cronin's other works, you definitely would enjoy this movie. I'd give Lee Cronin's The Mummy 4 stars. All right, let's go into spoilers. First, there is a demon in this movie, so there is this reinterpretation that the mummy is a demon, and this demon's focus is on destroying families. And so the movie does start out where you have a family in Cairo driving. There's the mother, father, 2 sons, and a daughter. The kids and the dad are singing, having a good time. The mom doesn't really seem like she's into it. Once they get back to their house, this is where they see this bird that has been dead in the cage, and that is a trigger that there's something wrong with going on downstairs. So they go downstairs where you see the sarcophagus, and this is where the mummy is. Eventually you learn that this family is in charge of keeping this mummy trapped and from trying to ruin and come to full power on our realm. And so that is why Katie is chosen, because a younger host will last longer and be able to retain the demon longer within its prison. There's some flooding where they have this house, and so they have to transport the sarcophagus, and during this transport the plane crashes, the 2 sons die, and this is where Katie is found. They see that she is mummified, they assume she's dead, and then she ends up breathing, and they realize, oh, she's not dead. The cops are called, they inform the family comes to visit, and this is where it's like something's not right with Katie, and they see the state she's in. She looks mummified. It's hard to tell if it's her skin or if she still has some kind of wrapping on her throughout most of the movie. And then they end up taking Katie back to their Albuquerque home where they're staying with the grandmother. And when they show up and the 2 kids are outside with the grandma, and they open the door to see Katie, they all have this kind of shocked look on their face because they weren't sure what to expect, but definitely what they see is not what they get. But then there's this funny scene where she's in a wheelchair, and instead of carrying her up the stairs and putting her in her bed, Charlie and Larissa basically drag the wheelchair step by step, just thud, thud, thud throughout this scene, and it's a little unnerving. At the end of it, Charlie does pick her up and put her in the bed, so don't understand why they didn't do that right away. The story also has the slow decay of Katie's room throughout time as the demon's slowly becoming more powerful. Eventually is able to kind of do some mind control, takes control of Maud for part of the film, which has some interesting concepts, and also controls Sebastian, the son, as well. They realize that the only way to get the demon out of Katie is to transfer the demon into someone else's body. So Charlie sacrifices himself, takes the demon, they lock him in the basement, and then eventually you find out earlier in the movie when the detectives found out what was going on, they found a tape with Katie being mummified, and the mom who was doing it, she gets shot during this scenario with the detective, and you assume she's dead, but nope, at the end of the movie she's in prison, and this is when they bring Charlie, and they basically return to Cinder, the demon, to this Cairo family's mother. And so that's kind of the whole gist of the story, which I found it interesting. I don't think it's super deep or really saying anything, but overall for a horror movie, I really enjoyed it. And then there was this professor that's brought up a couple times in the film, and I wish they would have did more with the professor. He's the one that kind of indicates that this is a demon that has taken over Katie based on some of the scripture that is seen on the wrappings that they've taken off her. In regards to the body horror, there's a lot of stuff with like Katie's skin. They're trying to clean her up, cut her toes and her nails, and this is where some of the kind of clicking of toenails happens. You also have a part where her nails coming off the foot and releases some skin, although you don't really know if it's actually skin or this mummy wrapping. I think it's really a mummy wrapping, but it's just kind of ingrained into the skin, so it's a little bit of both. You also have the clicker teeth sound, as I mentioned earlier, and this is used that Katie was in some form of Girl Scouts in Cairo, and so she was learning Morse code. And Charlie one night hears the clicking and realizes that it's a code. And so he goes and finds the old book to decipher it and ends up realizing that Katie's still trapped in there. Because the doctors basically said she's in like trapped in syndrome, where that's why she's acting erratic. There's no indication that it's a demon. There's some exorcist style stuff that happens when Katie's first at the house. So there's, you know, this kind of exorcist influence. There's some kind of vomiting that occurs, and that is used throughout the movie, is that the vomit on the floor is eaten through the wood. Eventually, there's a scene later in the movie where Katie is trapped in her room. They locked her in during the grandma's wake, because the grandma is one of two people who die in this movie. There's a scene where Katie is kind of losing control, gets the grandma into her room, and basically, you know, telepathically pushes her out the window, ends up landing on the car where Charlie and the other two kids are coming back from school. And then the mother-in-law gets pulled off the car by these wolves that are in the area and gets basically eaten alive. And so there's a wake for her, and this wake, this is where Maud has been constantly controlled by Katie for a little bit, and Maud is sitting at a table where some food is, and she's just slowly pulling out her teeth, which is really disgusting, but she kind of has this psychotic, amused look on her face, and she looks up and sees Katie actually dig in through the wood of the bedroom above, and this is how Katie escapes. But then Maud walks into the other room, is fiddling around inside Grandma's casket. You don't really know what's going on. Eventually walks to her parents and starts smiling, and what she did was take the dentures out and put them in her mouth, and she removed all her teeth. So that was a little super creepy, but at the same time you have Katie walking across the ceiling, jumping into the grandma's casket, starts attacking her even though she's dead. But this is used as another form of control, where I guess this demon can bring the dead back to life in some zombie form. It's very Deadite-ish in regards to, it looks a lot and kind of has this campiness to it, that's in the Evil Dead movies, and so that's where a lot of the Evil Dead influence comes in. So the wake scene was pretty interesting. There's also some stuff with some food and some blood that happens in that scene that might gross you out. And then the house layout is the interesting thing. Is this, it's kind of a big house, and it has these hidden corridors throughout the rooms, which I assume is used for storage, because the entry to them is only maybe a 3x3 little small door in the wall. And there are some scenes where Katie ends up in those corridors, trying to get into Seb's room earlier in the film and freaking him out. And then the parents see that she's kind of hiding around. They chase her throughout these corridors, end up finding her kind of crouched in the corner eating a spider or scorpion. And so there's some gross stuff with there. And then there's a scene later where detective shows up to show the tape that she found at the Cairo family's house in regards to what happened with Katie, and they show that to the parents, and they're just in utter shock. And there's a scene where the detective is, I guess, trying to fight off the grandma, now reincarnated as this demon dead zombie, and there's a scorpion that goes in through her throat, and there's some gross stuff with the throat scorpion tail coming out. And even though she doesn't die, there's a lot of horrific stuff that goes on with her. And that's one thing I would have to say about this movie. There's not really a lot of deaths. There's two, if I recall: the grandma who gets killed, and then in the beginning of the movie, when the Cairo family is investigating if the demon is slowly getting its power back, when they open the sarcophagus to check, the demon does some stuff with some chains and basically hooks the dad with a chain through the jaw. And so those are the only two deaths. So a lot of it is mostly body horror and some other grotesque